and welcome to this edition. My name is Tendai Pilatwe. In this lesson, we will discuss some characteristics of ancient West Africa. We will focus especially on the Bantu migration, the Stateless Society, and the city of Genii. West Africa has a long and complex history, and although much has been lost in the shadows and fogs of a time before people created written accounts, historians, like detectives, search for clues in language patterns, artifacts unearthed by archaeologists, and oral accounts passed down from generation to generation. Using this evidence, they can reconstruct areas of history that has been long forgotten. We're going to look at three aspects of West African history that will give us a taste of the richness of the culture found in this area of the world. First, let's talk about the Bantu migrations. Bantu was an ancient language spoken by people who lived in what is now Cameroon and Nigeria in West Africa. These people primarily were farmers who lived in villages along rivers. About 1500 BCE, their crops, including newer foods like yams, bananas, were flourishing. Their population was expanding. Their land was becoming a bit overcrowded. Some of them decided it was time to move on. Over the next 2,000 years, the Bantu people moved slowly and gradually in two directions: south down the coast of West Africa and east across the continent, with a turn to the south as they progressed. As they moved, the Bantu spread their agricultural practices, their language, and their culture. Along the way, they developed iron tools and weapons that aided their spread and made their cultural endeavors more efficient. The Bantu people did not move into empty lands. They often encountered resistance from those already living in the prospective new homelands. The Bantu, however, had an advantage of iron weapons, as well as the force of movement that pushed native people off their land and assimilated them into the Bantu way of life. By about 500 CE, the Bantu migrations were complete. The Bantu people occupied nearly all of Africa south of the Sahara Desert. Today, in fact, about 90 million people speak modern descendants of Bantu languages, which includes Swahili and Zulu. A different sort of government. As the Bantu people migrated, they carried their style of government with them. Their social groups were often called stateless societies. A better term for them might be kin-based societies. Stateless societies were different from modern Western governments. For one thing, they lacked a centralized hierarchy, government officials like a president or a congress, a bureaucracy to take care of daily business. Instead, a stateless society was led by family groups that balanced the ruling power among them and made decisions together for the good of the whole society. Sometimes these family groups controlled just one village through a council of elders, which comprised of male heads of the family and occasionally an elected chief who spoke for the council. Other times, family groups exercised their power over several villages to form a district. In this case, village chiefs met together to decide important issues. These networks could sometimes grow very large and contain thousands of people, but they were always governed by families and never by officials or bureaucrats. Genii. At times, these stateless societies even grew into cities. This happened in Genii, which began as a small fishing village along the Niger River in modern-day Mali, about 250 BCE. Founded by Bantu people, the little town attracted more settlers over the years. It was thriving, a walled city ruled by family groups. Most people in Genii lived in around mud brick houses and with thatched roofs. Some of them worked with iron manufacturing and trade. Others were merchants which dealt with fish, rice, poultry, and domestic animals. In fact, in about 8th century CE, Genii was a major commercial center of West Africa, and its approximately 13,000 people were mostly flourishing. It remained a stateless society. Unfortunately for Genii, times were changing. competition sprang up in a nearby town of Genii, which had a king who converted to Islam and drew away Islamic trade. In the 11th and 12th century, Genii steadily declined, and by 1400 CE it became a ghost town. We've covered a lot of ground in this introduction. Let's have a lesson summary. So let's review what we've learned. The Bantu migrations, the Bantu people spread from their homeland in Cameroon and Nigeria throughout much of sub-Saharan Africa over 2,000 years, from 1500 BCE to 500 CE. As they migrated south and east, they spread their agricultural practices, their language, their culture, and iron working skills. The people they encountered along the way were either pushed off their lands or assimilated into the Bantu culture. The Bantu people also spread their stateless societies. Stateless societies lacked a centralized hierarchy of government officials and politicians, and instead were led by family groups that balanced the ruling power among them and made decisions together for the good of the whole society. Sometimes these family groups controlled just one village, although the council of elders and at times a chief. Other times the family groups exercised their power over several villages to form a district. In this case, the village chiefs met together to discuss important issues. Occasionally, these stateless societies even grew into cities. So this happened in Genii, which began as a fishing village along the Niger River in modern-day Mali about 250 BCE. Genii, as we've said, grew into a thriving city by 400 CE and became a major commercial center of West Africa. In 11th and 12th century, Genii steadily declined due to competition from nearby Islamic town of Genii. By 400 CE, it had become a ghost town. Thank you very much for joining me on today's edition of Africa Day, and see you soon.